I wanted to talk today a little bit about consolidation. I work for a big, bad consolidator, as somebody said to me earlier. I think we're probably a medium-sized good consolidator. I want to make the case for why consolidation is really important. And I think we face a really critical question at the moment about how we leverage scale and how we integrate businesses so that we can deliver really excellent customer outcomes in what is, I think, a new era of consumer duty. Over the last 10 years, we've talked all about the changes that we've seen and that they are significant. The landscape has changed dramatically, and that's just in the last decade. RDR was even before that. So we know that the world has changed, and the combination of this legislative change, consumer behaviour changes, and actually the entry of private equity into the financial planning and wealth management space has meant that there are more and more businesses operating at scale. And I think the question is, well, is scale a good thing for consumers? Over the last few weeks, empowered by the consumer duty, I think the regulators started to show their teeth. They're using retirement income review, Dear CEO letters, the nature of which is clearer, a requirement to act proactively, and now an ongoing advice review. So there is a real focus on delivering client reviews, an expectation around how many of those reviews there are, how many happened, and where we've refunded clients as a result of not delivering those reviews. And that priority against a backdrop of private equity funding, increasing debt, increasing cost of debt, and the need to service clients, I think, is creating, let's say, some conflicts of interest around that. So how do we, against that backdrop, align those interests to make sure that actually we're addressing client needs? And I think bigger firms do give us a better opportunity for that. We can boast bigger resources, the ability to manage risk, implement processes. There's possibly a question about how well you can know those clients, whereas a small business will have a really highly personalised touch. Do they have the same access to cutting-edge technology? So lots to consider. But I think if we think about some of the businesses that we have in the UK, I'll give you an example firm, which I'm going to call ABC Financial, because I'm not very imaginative, and I want to protect their anonymity. There are 3 financial planners in this business, all of whom are directors. They've got a paraplanner, an administrator, and their office manager is one of the directors' wives, and she is also SMF 1617. This is a really typical business in the UK. The FCA data recognises there's probably about 4,000 firms of that size who operate in a really similar way. And that firm thought that RDR would kill them. They were really worried about it. But actually, they realigned their proposition, and they're quite a profitable business now. Clients typically pay between 0.5% and 1%. The clients who pay 1% get an annual review face-to-face with their advisor. Often it involves lunch with the DFM as well. I'll leave my thoughts on that to one side. And the clients who pay 0.5%, they're pretty reactive to. They can contact their advisor whenever they like, but they don't have a formalised review or, to use the current parlance, a continuing suitability assessment. And the challenge is, can they continue to operate that quite profitable business model? I'd argue possibly not if they've got to deliver good value to all of those clients. I also talked a little bit about data requests. Regulatory data requests are actually quite a challenge for smaller businesses, as they are for bigger businesses. But the Retirement Income Review Survey, as an example, was a 60-page questionnaire that landed in their inbox with a due date of the eve of Consumer Duty. And whilst this firm knows all of their clients personally, they know how old the children are, they know what the dog's called, can Janet, who is our SMF 1617, wife of director and office manager, Can she access all the data that she needs to respond to that survey? Does she know how many clients reduced their income in the last 12 months for fear of running out of money? Does she know how they're going to address the challenge of a depleting pot and therefore a depleting fee on an ad valorem basis to deliver that good quality service? I'm not trying to beat up ABC. I think we all have the same challenges, but I do think there is a reality that those sort of firms will get gobbled up by the consolidators. So our mission has to be to ensure that that action delivers better outcomes for clients, because I think it's going to happen anyway. And the answer to delivering better outcomes has to lie in integration. Acquisitions alone don't guarantee success. It's about seamlessly integrating data, really critically, and most importantly, a client-centric culture across the organisation. That's how you unlock the benefits of scale. So you've got to bring everybody along with you, bring that data along with you. That's my current pain point. And that gives you a competitive advantage. You can use cutting-edge technology. I think we can all imagine this AI-powered future where we get instant gratification of client responses. We can go back to them really quickly, take all the heavy lifting out, but still deliver a personal service. Proposition's another key area. Without the bias of knowing your individual clients, a bigger business has the opportunity to really understand their target market, segment those clients, and develop propositions that meet their financial planning and investment management needs. Again, better outcomes. Scale also means that you can negotiate, advocate for your clients across the distribution chain to reduce costs and deliver efficiencies. So I think there's a real benefit to clients for these larger businesses. We've talked about AI a bit. I think the future's really clear. There's a marriage of AI and personal service, and large integrated firms are best positioned to be able to navigate that transition and empower advisors with those tools. So in conclusion, I think the scale is good. By integrating resources, really prioritising client outcomes, we can create a change for the better where size empowers.
Brilliant. Thank you, Natalie. That was great. There's certainly some passion in that voice, and I think that's going to be a theme of today. Jenny, can I hand over to you, please?
Certainly, I'm Jenny Davidson. So this is really focused on my role as Commercial Proposition Director in Quilter. So it's for the affluent segment. And the affluent segment actually spans advice, so that's our own advice firm. It's our platform, and it's also investment solutions under Quilter Investors. So in terms of those three core areas, from a channel perspective, I actually have the responsibility for the existing products, the services, the end-to-end proposition, and also the governance across those three, but also the future strategic roadmap as well. If we look at the platform and investment solutions, we actually distribute not only just to our own advisors, but also to IFAs. So we've got full vertical integration, but also we serve the IFA market as well. So what's really interesting about the remit is it's broad, and it can seem quite challenging, but it's hugely rewarding because it allows me and it allows my colleagues within Quilter to really understand the advisor, the outcomes they're trying to achieve within their business, but also the customer outcomes. So again, back to your point about segmentation and the customer need, that's really paramount to us. And we can see it end to end across the whole of the value chain. At Quilter, we are a wealth manager, a modern wealth manager. We do have the client at the heart of everything we do, but actually it's the delivery of advice, and it's also the enabler of advice, which is central to what we do, particularly around our proposition and the solutions that we're trying to deliver in the market and our existing as well. For me personally, when I think about advice, I don't think as we are change agents here. I think as advice, we need to do more to actually promote it. For me, they really are the hero makers for people's financial futures. And particularly around pre- and post-retirement, I think there's a huge amount of work really to become advocates for what they do and the service that they provide. So looking at the remit that I manage, I did talk about challenge. If you're looking externally into the area that I run, it probably seems quite complex. And it was a point that was made earlier around the discipline approach. So it's very disciplined in what I do, the team does in proposition and thinking through pricing and also how we construct a strategic roadmap. But fundamentally, it's also about real focus and real drive. We're trying to do the right thing by customers, we're trying to do the right thing by our advisors, and that really is agnostic to whether it's our own advice firm or also IFAs. And I think the point is that advisors are advisors, regardless of how we actually classify them in the business. They still have the same needs, the wants, and they're trying to power up their business. So I think that's a key consideration. The other thing for us at Quilter is, and I think this is really powerful when we think about IFAs, is because we have our own advice business, we're actually uniquely placed. We actually understand the role of advisors, the different roles within their business. We understand the different business models that are in existence, so whether that's direct, network models, franchise, etc. We also understand the regulatory and the compliance requirements, the different hurdles you have to meet. We understand the client needs and the good outcomes you're trying to create for your clients as an advisor. We also understand the client, the life stages, and the different complexity, the propositions you need, solutions you require to meet those different life stages. So I think we're uniquely placed because of that, and that really does help us to then build and create the right environment, the right solutions, the right investments, the right products for the market, because we actually just get it. We understand what you need. I was thinking about also around what else do we do to understand the advisor, and that is continual feedback. So we talk to advisors. We want to understand their motivations. We're trying to understand what's happening in the market. So going back to previous comments about consolidation and, advisors are looking at retirement. So, the role that places. We also are looking at the needs and, importantly, what is the future in terms of that from a strategic perspective as well. The other point around regulatory change is really important. So because we have our own advice, we can interpret regulatory change from their perspective, because we have our own advice firm, we understand the implication for that advice firm, and therefore that can be applied across the market as well. And consumer duty was a really good example of that for us. We've got lifetime allowance as well. But in terms of consumer duty, that feedback allowed us to effectively understand that there was a need to look at customer segmentation, because advisors were doing that, they were telling us, and they were looking at tiered charging as well. So we brought to market tiered advisor charging as part of the propositional enhancements to the platform. When we look at our platform, it's the UK largest platform. We're continually looking at propositional development. We're looking at the needs of customers and advisors, I've said before, but we're looking at how do we bring things to market, how do we bring agility and speed to market for propositions. And a great example of that was the Cash Hub. So again, feedback, high interest rates, customers looking at cash products. Advisors were telling us that customers were delaying their decisions to invest in the market, make investment decisions. So for us, that was about rapidly identifying that demand, that need from the customer, and effectively mobilising propositionally to actually achieve that, delivering that in the market in January. And that allows customers to now have access to cash products and then to view and holistically manage them on the platform for advisors. And again, irrespective of whether it's a own advice firm or IFAs, it's just meeting a need propositionally. If we look at our solutions and investment side, we have a kind of breadth of investment solutions. We're constantly looking at the market, and what we're doing is meeting client demand there, but we're also looking at the trends and the need to adapt. So we all know about the trend to MPS and the success it's had in the market. Our Wealth Select MPS is one of the largest with over 14 billion. But again, looking at client demand, looking at IFA requirements and demand from IFAs, we're now launching that on multiple third-party platforms. So again, it's listening to the advisor. And I think the other thing that I really want to talk about is really the people in the team. So the team that I run the privilege of, they are diverse, they are very talented, they have different backgrounds and experiences, and actually harnessing that is because they're all change agents. They want to drive change in our industry, but they're really respectful of it. They're respectful of the value of advice, and how that can actually change the financial futures of individuals is really important. And then lastly, I think all of us, looking back at the report produced about future of financial advice, it does say that advice is going to continue to grow, but also it's about client demand. And I think that is really important that we remember that there is demand from a client perspective as well for advice, the reasons for it, the life cycle changes, and that is really important for our industry to continue to be the change agents and deliver what is required for customers.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Nikki, I'm going to hand you this little clicker because you have a couple of slides. You're changing it up a bit.
I do. So when Emma invited me to attend the panel, I have to say I felt like a bit of a fraud because I don't think you put Forrester's Financial, where I'm the chief exec, and wealth into the same sentence. I'm not sure I've seen that before. We bought in, or we have about 1.3 million customers who do invest, but at the very low end, and that typically is because they came in via family investments, so child trust funds, junior ISAs and things like that. So typically our customers only have a few £1,000s to invest. That's why I felt like a fraud. Luckily, I heard the first CEO panel and particularly Ruth and Andy talking about this whole kind of how do we move back and help people who aren't otherwise helped. I felt a bit better. And then when I saw Paddy come up onto the stage B&Q, I thought, wow, job done. Because about a year ago, I hired my chief customer officer from B&Q because I think it's more important to understand families and people than it is to understand the technicalities of the products that we serve. So that's made me feel a bit better.
Oh, good.
So I wanted to talk about a few things. And I suppose, first of all, is to say that, as I say, we do have everyday customers. So we really are at the sharp end of the advice gap. And I won't talk through the advice gap because you've heard lots about it today. I think the only point I would make is that Mark was significantly less optimistic about the number of people who've had financial advice than my stat was 26% and his was 11%. But lies and damn statistics, it's not enough, I think is the important thing. So the thing that I thought I'd tell you about is a little bit about our model, which is a bit different to the others in the room. And I think we're the only people who offer what we call basic advice model in the UK at the moment, but it's actually sort of interesting, not because it perhaps applies directly to some other models, but it does just show us how we might kind of ease back in the direction. And particularly it's important when we talk about the advice and guidance boundary and some of the things that the regulator is already thinking about in terms of simplified advice. So we're a kind of living model of where that exists today, but really at the end of, so very simple. So our customers are simple, as I said, and they tend to have very simple needs. So we're currently debating the very big question of how many funds should we offer. At the moment it's sort of about one and sort of an ESG option, but actually radically we might offer them a choice of three, but we think any more than three and they really are going to get caught in the headlights. It's a bit like too many jams on the shelf of the supermarket. If you have too many, then you end up not buying any of them. So our products and services are really simple, but also when we look at how can we make advice viable for that really small end of the market, there are a few things that basic advice does. And it basically does this because it's a decision tree type advice. So you're putting very little requirement for discretion and huge amounts of capability in the advisor's hands. But what you are doing, which we found is really important, is you're putting a person at the front end. And actually, that person at the front end, you might think, and the urban myth is that, oh yeah, that's for older people, younger people love technology, they'll be doing robo stuff, etc. We have our child trust fund customers turning 18 each month. It's the 18-year-olds, not their parents, who really want to sit down with us and talk face to face. So while they love using technology for servicing, when it comes to making a really big decision in their life as to what they're going to do with the £5,000-6,000 that they might have invested into their account, they want a person in front of them. So what we try and do is make putting that person in front of them as efficient as it can be. And the ways that we can do that is our 200 advisors who are based around the country. don't do everything face-to-face anymore. They use video. Power of COVID made us realise that, so video is actually a thing and we can use it. They also don't have to have the same level of qualifications as a level 4 financial planner, and only about half of them come from financial services. The other half can be any other types of sales roles, and it's much more important that they've got the engagement with customers and can give them that confidence and support. We can then train them on what they need to know for our simple products and services. That also then means that ongoing CPD is less than it would be for a level 4 planner. It also means that the length of the sale or the advice that they're giving typically is less than you would have for a level 4. And it means that our oversight, while we still do have oversight for these advisors, it's less than it would be for level 4. So all of these things to kind of think about. And the other thing that's really takes down a barrier is that given stakeholder products still allow you to put the fee into the product rather than a separate advice fee, we don't suffer the same barriers to customers not wanting to pay for advice. So that's great. I came into the business a year ago and it still looked pretty traditional, not quite the man from the Pru, but kind of almost there. So what are we doing now to help us be even better for the future? We talk about powering up our customer teams. That's sort of one half of our strategy. And there's two things that sit within here. So we want to keep the person at the front end, but you won't be able to see this in detail. We did a whole pie chart of where do our advisors spend their time. And there was way too much time on admin, way too much time on things like prospecting. They were even going out and door knocking because we didn't have enough customer information, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've tried to do is reduce the number of customers that they actually look at in their allocated portfolios. So really focusing down on the customers who want to need their help, putting a lot more of the customers who don't want to need to help in a central pool, either engagement or advice. Similar to what Daniel said, then it really is not every customer needs advice, and so we can put them in somewhere else. And then that really allows them to spend more time on the advice with the customers who need them. And then on the right-hand side, it's using all the data that we have on these customers in a clever way to make sure that we are targeting down on the customers that want and need our help, rather than just everybody that they were seeing before. So a bit of a transformation in the model, but also a very simple model to start with.
Thank you. I think we picked our panel quite well because we've got three very different businesses all centred around supporting the advice of the future. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes now just on some questions. We have got one question on Slido, so up to you if you prefer to use Slido. Have a think about your question, stick your hand up and I'll come to you. But the first question that we've got on Slido, put my glasses on because I can't see anything, is for Natalie. In your opinion, what circumstances should you turn off ongoing fees and how long should we give a client to engage?
Oh, that's a really good question. And it's one we've been debating a little bit, actually. And we've come to the conclusion that, firstly, you've got to give people every opportunity. So if they haven't historically been having an annual suitability assessment, you've got to warm them up to that idea and explain to them what the benefits are. It's not as simple as you can just say, oh, we haven't spoken to them for 2 years, let's turn the fees off. Let's make sure we do everything we can to engage with them, because there is a benefit to those clients of having a meeting with their financial advisor. It doesn't have to be somebody sat in your home. I think sometimes that's the barrier, that they think, oh, somebody's going to come round, going to have to clean the house first, and then they're going to sit here and they're going to drink all my tea. But explaining that that's not the reality. Actually, if it suits you better, you can have a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, or we can just do it over the phone. Or actually, I can send you out some information and you can send that back to me and we can have a conversation like that. It doesn't have to be the old model. I think those are all the things you have to do first. But there is a point where you have to say, well, you're not engaging with us, therefore you're not getting any benefit. So we're going to disengage with you from now on. If you want to come back to us, you're absolutely welcome to. But for now, let's turn off the fees. And we've said, actually, if somebody declines a review 2 years in a row, that's what we're going to do. That's quite a difficult conversation to have. We've got a big back book of people, and it wasn't very popular when I first suggested that, but that is what we're doing.
Yeah, brilliant. And we found a lot of that when we went round and we spoke to businesses doing exactly that, reshaping that business model to be accountable for the things that we need to think about. Any questions from the floor? Sam.
Hi, all. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. We heard a little bit this morning about coaching, and we've heard a little bit about advice. What's the panel's views on, are they the same thing? Should we be exploring more coaching to get more people more engaged with all the things that we do in this room?
Yes, I'll start. So I think, as was mentioned in an earlier panel, there's even a step before coaching, which is financial education, and that can be at schools, it can be outside of schools in other channels, and it can also be through what the products and services providers do. So, you know, the challenge for us as a firm is we got these customers who've got child trust funds. How can we use education to get people really kind of thinking about it before they get to the age of, you know, kind of making or breaking decisions? I think whether it's coaching or targeted support, both as being perhaps kind of cheaper and simpler ways before you get into advice, they may not be the answer in terms of getting customers who are underconfident fully over the line to make a decision, but they certainly have a role to play in terms of getting them engaged and thinking about the things that they should be thinking about. And either they might then be happy to make a decision without advice, or else it, you know, sort of you offer the kind of call to action. If you really want to talk to somebody, if you want some advice, they're already a long way along that process. So I do think it's really important.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
I think just on the point of engagement, I absolutely agree. I think people like you is a way to get people engaged, so a way of educating. But I think there's a tendency to be to think through it. I think, you know, we've got extremes of it. So you've got your education, coaching, and you've got people like you effectively. Then you might have guidance, and then you might have advice. And I think it's just understanding at each point what's the role and the responsibilities in each, and making sure the customer understands that.
Great, thank you. Do we have any more questions burning from the audience, or shall I? Oh, Anthony.
In one of your recent reports, Emma, there was a delineation or a talk about planners versus advisors, if you like. And I'm just interested in the panel's view around, if you like, the new generation maybe of planners, and the fact that certain clients just simply won't or are not motivated to fully engage with that planning process. And is it the panel's view that you should just walk away from that client and say, well, our service is not for you? Or should maybe there be more flexibility within those advice firms to accept the fact that not all clients, day one, will necessarily want to engage in that full holistic planning process? They might be more transactional, for example.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one first, Natalie?
I think it comes down to how you address your target market, how you segment your clients. And it's okay for people to want different things. We definitely have a large number of people who are historic clients, shall we say, who actually things aren't changing year on year. They don't have a plan. They have a pot of money that they saved up over a period of time that they don't really need. You know, goal-based financial planning is completely lost on them. They haven't been through that journey. But we shouldn't just abandon them. I think those are the people that you deliver an ongoing service to, but it's just a different nature.
Does anyone else want to comment?
Probably just say at the other end of the spectrum, try talking to an 18-year-old about planning. I've got an 18-year-old. I can't get him to plan to get out of bed. So it's, I think that's another example of where transactional advice to help them make one decision followed by engagement to keep in touch, and then, you know, perhaps coming back at a later point when actually planning is right for them.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony.
Hi, I have a question for Nikki. I was just interested in what you were saying about that you sort of called your advice service like a basic advice service. I think we've heard lots of different things about simplified advice and things like that. So I'm just curious with how your model works. Do you only offer this basic advice service? And if that is the case, are you recommending some clients to more complex solutions? And if you offer both, are clients sort of leaning towards that basic option? Like, how do clients feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is that at the moment we just offer basic advice, but we do direct customers that we can see have got more complex needs, that we're not the right option for them. At some future point, we might go into partnership with people, etc., so that we can kind of more directly refer them to that. But absolutely, there will be customers that don't sit in our target market, and basic advice won't be right for them.
Okay.
We've talked about the risk of existing clients disengaging. I'm more concerned about succession planning of the future clients and how intergenerational planning might work. I'm a really good example when, on passing away of both my parents, I sacked their financial advisors for the simple reason that they hadn't engaged with me at any point during. My parents were divorced, it was 2 planners. Didn't know either of them. My parents were both independently wealthy. First thing I did was sack them, took control of the money. So what do we do to protect the future of our industry, and how do we make sure that the younger clients coming through engage with our planning? I think that the work that you're doing at Foresters does a good job to go some way towards that. I'm more concerned for the more mature businesses.
Great, thank you. Jenny, do you want to take that first and then we'll move?
No, I mean, all the statistics are there, aren't they, about, on death of, family assets, they do sack the advisor. I think, I think as an industry, we need to look beyond our geographical region and look at the States. They do have family days. So they bring, all the families together and they talk about the financial matters of the family. It's about well-being, it's about coaching, and it's not actually hidden around what's the finances within the family estate, essentially. So everybody understands the role of that planner and what they can do for every part of the family in terms of, building the plan out, and also what happens on death. They do talk about death as part of that, and the intergenerational, what happens on the death of, parents to their siblings and then to grandchildren. So I think as an industry, we probably need to get better at that and actually understand that we are in a life cycle individually. But also every one of us here is an actual customer. So I think we need to start talking about it and actually planning and ensuring that as advisors, we do actually bring the family into it, particularly around, husband and wives. There shouldn't be any delineation between husband and wife's partners or, anybody relationship. They should just know what's going on and make sure everybody understands what's going to happen on the event of death around assets, and the financial plan should be put in place for that, and any siblings or any benefactors for the assets. So I think it's just important that we look at other geographical regions and how successful they've been in doing that.
Thank you. We could go on about this all day. It's clearly very topical. There's a lot of passion in the room. Could you please join me in thanking my panellists?